Pandora's act of opening and then hastily closing the box serves as an analogy for the. Now, we've already looked at the reference to Pandora's act of opening and then hastily closing the box, which is the very beginning of the passage, the very first two lines. We don't need to look at it again. This is an inferential question. It asks us that what is this particular reference, the reference to Pandora, what is it an analogy to? What is it an analogy for, or what does it represent in the context of the passage? Option A says, the death and the subsequent vilification of representational art. This is incorrect. There are two problems with this. First off, while the death of representational art has been mentioned, the vilification has not. Vilification is basically a defaming of something, usually to write or speak about something in a disparaging manner, defame something, ruin the reputation of something. We see representational art mentioned in the last paragraph. One important way in which they protect postmodernism is by ignoring any alternative. They are silent when it comes to representational art. The postmodern movement has taken on the universality of the representational art with its history of 30,000 years and succeeded in the eyes of the contemporary art world establishment in wiping it off the face of the planet. So death, yes, absolutely true, but the vilification, the defaming of representational art, it has not been mentioned. The last statement doesn't talk about any defaming of representational art, which means that this option is incorrect. Also, the second and the larger problem is that the reference to Pandora, it is connected, as we see throughout the passage, to postmodern art and the influence of postmodernism on art. It is not directly related to representational art. So this is quite irrelevant as well. Option A is incorrect. Option B says, the birth and the subsequent lionization of functional art. Largely outside the premise, functional art has not been mentioned in the passage. We see that the passage is about the birth and the subsequent lionization. Lionization, making something famous, popularizing something, making something a trend, one could say. So lionization and birth of postmodernism or postmodernism in art, postmodern art, that has been mentioned. Are we talking about postmodernist art when we are talking about when we mention functional art? We are not sure because it has not been established. Postmodernist art has not been established as functional art. So we'd consider this to be outside the premise. Now, if we find that we'd be able to definitively eliminate options C and D, then we would have to revert back to B. Then it is the only probable answer because we are not certain whether postmodernist art can be called functional art. Such evidence has not been given in the passage, but that would be the only possible answer. Let's see if we can find something which is better. Option C tells us the arrival and the subsequent entrenchment of postmodernist art. This is perfect. We find the arrival of postmodernist art in the first paragraph. It is mentioned here. Recently, however, art has taken on a new form known as postmodernism, which in too many instances has served as little more than shock aesthetics, outrageous sensory stimuli created to provoke the psychological processes. Then we see that while the second and the third paragraphs, even the fourth paragraph, they talk about the entrenchment of postmodernist art, the entrenchment, the making of postmodernist art a deep-seated, deep-rooted reality in the present time. That has particularly been mentioned in the last two paragraphs. We can see it here. Artistic value is now interpreted, meaning that it is up to the curators to evaluate who are the best artists based on contemporary aesthetics, which is inevitably postmodernism, and to support them accordingly. In this way, postmodernists have substituted de Kooning for drawing, umbrellas for sculpture, and empty room for art. Also, we see this aspect of entrenchment in the last two lines, particularly. The postmodern movement has taken on the universality of representational art with its history of 30,000 years and succeeded in the eyes of the contemporary art world establishment in wiping it off the face of the planet. It has left the end point of art with bile instead of progress, knowledge, and exaltation. So yes, this is quite true. This is a reference to the reference to Pandora is an analogy for the arrival, the birth, and the subsequent entrenchment of postmodernist art. Now we find that we were right in eliminating option B because we have a direct reference to postmodernist art, which is the primary premise of the passage. We don't have to take the inferential step and equate it with functional art, not necessary at all. So we qualify C and B is left eliminated. Option D says birth of postmodernist art and its subsequent dissolution. Quite contradictory. Birth of postmodernist art, absolutely true, in line with the passage, but its subsequent dissolution, no dissolution has been mentioned. So this is outside the premise. Also, we have already established the entrenchment of postmodernist art, it becoming the new art system of the modern world, of the contemporary art world establishment. So its dissolution is directly contradictory to the passage, in fact. Hence, D is incorrect. The correct answer is option C.